And speaking of criminals, well, welcome to Australia, folks. Get this stuff. Now, this shows just how far we have degenerated as a society. In Australia, especially actually in Victoria, let me tell you about Victoria, folks. If you really want to look for domestic terrorism within Australia, you need look no further than the Victorian government. There are more police shootings in Victoria than in all the other states of Australia combined. The protectors of society in Victoria, the police, bring inhumanity to an entirely new level in a civilised country, I tell you. But anyway, in Australia, and especially in Victoria, as reported by the Herald Sun newspaper, children younger than 4 years old who are considered by the government to be mentally disturbed. This includes children who are diagnosed with things like ADD, mental disturbance, folks. And as the human cavity resonance rises, the children that are being born are getting more intelligent all the time. And many of them, as soon as they get to any type of age where they can see what's going on around them, they start rebelling against the system because they can see how corrupt and how inhumane it is. All the children that do this are considered ADD or ASD or this or that, and they're all considered mentally impaired. Okay, well, children as young as 4 years old who are considered mentally disturbed in Australia are being treated with electric shock treatment. Now, Medicare figures in Australia show that the use of electroconvulsive therapy has in fact tripled in the state of Victoria in the private health sector alone in 6 years. It's tripled in 6 years. A Victorian health report confirms that nearly 18,000 treatments were conducted in Victoria between 2007 and 2008. 1 year, 18,000 treatments of shock therapy on children, electroconvulsive therapy on children, were committed in 1 year in this country in the 21st century, folks. Now, federal government statistics show that the use of ECT, which is electric shock delivered straight to the brain, in the state's private health system increased from 1944 to 2001 and 2002 to 6009. Okay, 6009. It took from 1944 to 2001, 2002 for it to increase to 6009. And yet, between 2007 and 2008, we have seen 18,000 children being subjected to electroconvulsive therapy in Victoria alone. And this is in the private health system. And also, about 12,000 treatments were performed in the public health system last financial year. Now, folks, Medicare statistics record that 203 of these electroconvulsive therapy treatments on children were performed on children that are younger than 14 years old, including 55 children aged 4 years old and younger. Now, folks, we are talking about children, and children younger than 4 years old, who are being subject to shock therapy against their will. Now, as this has come to light, thankfully the Western Australian government has moved to ban ECT procedures for children under 12, but the Victorian government is, of course, not saying whether it's going to follow or not. The Victorian government, folks, I tell you, these people, it's no wonder that there are so many people that move out of Victoria every year with a government like we have in Victoria. Victorian government in Australia is possibly one of the most draconian governments in the Western world. They really are, folks. I just, I don't know. Even if I was on a speaking tour, if I was playing in a band the way I used to do, there's just no reason I'd go to Victoria, because the government in that state, they live in the dark ages. It almost defies analysis. But the figures that have come to light, folks, regarding the shock treatments on children, these have really shocked a lot of experts. Professor Pat McGorry, the chairman of the National Youth Mental Health Foundation, said that it was of great concern and we need to know why this is happening. Why has this use increased at this rate? He says that he is shocked and amazed that children that young are being treated in this way. This is coming from a doctor, folks. See, they use this electrotherapy, folks, to treat mental disorders. A lot of people thought that shock therapy went out years ago, but here we find the Australian government using shock therapy on children. I don't know how many other people they're using it on, but this has come to light that they're doing this on children, folks. 18,000 children in Victoria alone. 18,000 children. Folks, the whole of Australia only has a population of 22 million people. We don't have a lot of people here. And here we are finding 18,000 children in Victoria, which is actually the smallest state on the entire Australian mainland. There are 18,000 children in this state that have received this treatment. So how much does this extrapolate out across the country? In a country of 22 million people, how much does this go out across other states that are a lot bigger than Victoria? I mean, Victoria is tiny, folks. If you look at a map of Australia, have a look at Victoria. It's a very small state. It's the smallest state on the mainland, apart from the Capital Territory, which is basically just the city. It's tiny. I mean, the Australian Capital Territory is about the size of a small farm in the outback. But anyway, that's what's happening, folks. It's all of these children that are being subjected to this shock treatment. It's absolutely outrageous. Side effects of this treatment include things like memory loss, seizures, headaches, and there are even some doctors and academics who are supporting this. Associate Professor Nicholas Tonti Filippini supports ECT on children, saying that some toddlers were disturbed. I think that he is probably severely disturbed, my friends. I would suggest that if anybody needed to be in a psycho ward and subject to ECT, it is probably Professor Nicholas Tonti Filippini. But then I wouldn't even really wish it on him, folks. It's just not an acceptable way of treating people, especially children. So yes, I thought I'd touch on a few of these news items this week, folks, simply because they are important issues. There has been a lot going on in the last week and in the last couple of weeks, really. And it's great to see that some people have been deciding to stand up and take action, such as the motion that's been put forth in The Hague against Bush, Cheney, Rice et al. That I mentioned before. There's also been a motion started in England. It's been brought to people's attention in England that Tony Blair was prepared to deceive Parliament over Iraq and actually freeze out opposition within his government because of his unshakable belief that it was right to topple Saddam Hussein. And this has been said by a former cabinet minister by the name of Claire Short, who was the International Development Secretary, who resigned after the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And Ms. Short very much attempted to dispute the legality of the war in Iraq, which is, as we all know, completely illegal. Now, there has also been a political group which has suggested that Tony Blair should be tried in a Scottish court for his decision to take the country to war in Iraq. The Crown Office, which leads prosecutions, is actually examining their arguments following the former Prime Minister's appearance at the Chilcot inquiry, where he openly expressed no regrets over disposing of Saddam Hussein. A parliamentary motion calling for Blair to be prosecuted has been laid down. So that's another good sign, folks. And there's a little bit of this going on around the place. It's also good to see that the Bank of America chief, Ken Lewis, has been charged with fraud. According to CNNmoney.com, the New York Attorney General unveiled a major legal action against senior Bank of America executives over its controversial purchase of Merrill Lynch, including bringing civil charges against former CEO Ken Lewis. Now, the lawsuit that's been brought against these people contends that the bank's management team understated the losses at Merrill in order to get shareholders to approve the deal, and then subsequently overstated the firm's willingness to terminate the merger in order to get a $20 billion aid handout from the federal government. And the lawsuit contends that the Bank of America, through its top management, engaged in a concerted effort to deceive shareholders and American taxpayers at large. So this is really good to see, folks. It's really good to see that there are some people out there that are actually taking matters in hand, and we may have a chance of holding some of these people accountable, though the legal system tends to just let them off anyway. But we can hope, folks, and it is good to see these sort of things going on. And it's very important that we, the people, support these type of actions to hold these criminals accountable and to bring them to justice.